CNBC TV 18 Weekender, only on CNBC TV 18.
I'm outside the temple of Indian democracy, the Parliament, and with me is noted historian, anthropologist, sociologist, and once even an environmentalist, Ram Guha. I have purposely refrained from calling you a public intellectual, as you've said that more public and intellectual becomes less of an intellectual.
That's right, yeah.
You know, somebody very famously said that that India has managed to disappoint both the optimists and the pessimists.
Yeah.
And he was speaking in context of the Indian economy. But I think the same can be said about Indian democracy, where you've called it a 50-50 democracy. And you've highlighted various areas where we are yet to reach what our forefathers may have wanted us to. And freedom of expression is one area, and you've laid out 8 threats. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, these threats have existed from the time India was independent. No political party has rolled them back. So, before I come to threats per se, I want it to be understood that mine is not a partisan argument attacking a particular party or favoring another party. The Indian political class is nervous about granting full freedom of expression. So, they have used archaic colonial laws, for example, the sedition law, which has a very arbitrary definition of what constitutes sedition, under which Gandhiji was prosecuted, for example, and Tilak, that is retained on the statute books. Then you have the rise of identity politics, where every group, whether it be a caste-based group, a region-based group, a religion-based group, is nervous about its hero. So you can't have a fair and open, transparent understanding of Shivaji or Ambedkar or Golwalkar or the Prophet Muhammad. And unless there is room for rigorous, research-based interpretation and debate, even if this offends people, a democracy should allow it, unless it actually advocates violence. Then you have things like curbs on the press. So, the dependence on commercial advertisements. Then you have the pusillanimity of the police force. For example, if the MNS wants to attack an editor they don't like, the police won't protect that editor, right? Then you have, of course, finally, the complicity of writers themselves. You have too many writers in India and journalists are directly allied to a particular politician or political party. So you will have people who are always making apologies for the left or for the Naxalites, or you will have BJP intellectuals who are happy to attack
people who don't agree with their worldview.
They will attack Muslims for banning satanic verses, but they'll stay quiet when the Hindus ban M.F. Hussein's paintings and so on. This is the kinds of constraints on clear, reasoned, rigorous debate, which affect our filmmakers, our artists, our writers. Bans on films. I mean, why should we have a censor board? It's totally archaic. It's a colonial era institution that should be disbanded. So in that sense, and again, going back to my formulation of a 50-50 democracy, clearly, as a writer, I'm talking to you. So I'm relatively free. I'm much freer than I would be in China. You can't do this outside the national people. No chance. But I'm not as free as someone would be in Canada or Sweden or a thoroughbred democracy.
Tell me, you've laid out 8 threats. Clearly these 8 threats could not have been static. I'm sure, so one threat becomes more at some point, some other threat becomes dormant or almost non-existent. In today's context, do you feel like, all these 8 threats, whether it's in active court, sort of, entertaining frivolous petitions, as you said, the pusillanimity of either the cops or even the politicians, which politician can actually stand up and actually criticize many of these fringe groups. So in that sense, do you feel that today it's rather unique because all these 8 threats are kind of strong?
Well, I would say, Judy, there's been a steady slide over the last 25 years. In my essay, I argue that probably the defining point was Rajiv Gandhi's banning of the satanic verses. Because once you are scared of mullahs, then next you'll be scared of Sanghis, then you'll be scared of Dalit intellectuals, then you'll be scared of Tamil groups, then it'll become somebody else. So it has been a steady slide, and we haven't arrested it. But it's been going on for the last 20-25 years. And also, as I argue in my essay, writers in Indian languages are more vulnerable. I am partly protected because I write in English. I'm protected because my reach isn't seen as wide as a Hindi writer or a Marathi writer,
or as threatening as maybe.
And also because there may be more publicity because everything is centered around the metros and English writers, and if there's an attack on me, or someone like me, or Amitabh Ghosh, people may think that there's people, they're more nervous. Vigilante groups are more nervous than they would be to attack Perumal Murugan, the brave Tamil writer who can't even go back to his hometown.
And none of the Tamil politicians.
Not Jayalalitha, the Madras High Court has passed a good judgment. But how can you enforce it if the police in the state aren't willing to protect the freedom of expression? So it's a worrisome aspect of our democratic life. It's an area in which we are clearly deficit, and rather than proudly proclaim that, for example, I'm accused of hypocrisy, they'll say, look, you're speaking on TV about freedom of expression. Does that mean India's, how can you say India is not free? It's free to a limited extent. And a democracy only develops through reflection, critique, self-analysis, which can only come about if writers and artists and filmmakers and thinkers have full freedom of expression.
Talking of reflection, self-introspection, Ram, the first amendment that the independent government passed was Article 19(2), where freedom of expression was tightened, where they brought in this whole new dimension of public disorder.
That's right.
So clearly, many would say that the blame eventually goes back to Jawaharlal Nehru.
Actually, there were three people who were involved in that. Jawaharlal Nehru as Prime Minister, Vallabhbhai Patel as Home Minister, and B.R. Ambedkar as Law Minister. All three were behind the First Amendment.
Right.
Okay, so they are three great icons of Indian democracy and Indian nationalism. But at that stage, they were nervous. It was 1948. There was a communist insurgency on. Mahatma Gandhi had just been murdered by religious fanatics. They were nervous. So they brought this amendment. It was a mistake. But what has stopped politicians after Nehru, Patel, and Ambedkar in 65 years to undo it?
But what stopped Nehru from not undoing it, considering the fact that you said there was a left-wing extremism, there was a right-wing extremism?
Nehru should have undone it
in the next 15 years. Why didn't he not?
He should have undone it. By the late 50s, he didn't do it. Because Nehru, unlike the politicians of today, at least had a theoretical understanding of the importance of artistic and intellectual freedom. I mean, in practice, he may not have gone far enough as we wish. And that was a tragic mistake, not to undo it after the threats to Indian unity had passed, the communist insurgency had been tamed, the Hindu fundamentalists had come on board, the Jan Sangh and the communists were fighting elections. We'd had two successful elections. Certainly in the late 50s, I think Nehru, one of his mistakes, among several mistakes he made in the last few years of his life, was not undoing the First Amendment.
Ram, go hold that thought. We'll quickly slip into a break. On the other side, there's lots more with eminent historian Ramchandra Guha. Don't go anywhere.
BJP says we are for a uniform civil code. You become knee-jerk reactions against it. And I think it is truly appalling.
CNBC TV 18 Weekender.